Welcome to our first Interagency Expo. Like many of you of us speaking today who will be speaking with you, I am a military spouse. I started my back one slide, please. I started my military career years ago as a temporary employee, went overseas, came back, and I was able to use the executive order 12473 to be able to get on a permanent position. Excuse me. Um, so, what I'm going to be covering on this is just strictly the DoD Military Spouse Preference Program. And at the end of it, we'll be sure to make sure you know the difference between this program and the non-competitive hiring authorities excuse me, that are also an avenue for you to get federal employment. Next slide, please. So, this is what we're going to have our room as a breakout session. We're starting out at 1 o'clock. We're going to do this presentation. Then we'll open up the floor for audio to allow you to raise your hand and ask us questions directly. We will also at that time open the chat to allow you to send us written questions that we will answer in the background. And that being said, what we want you to know is that during the audio Q&A time, you should raise your hand and we will acknowledge you and open your microphone to allow you to ask your question. The raise your hand feature can be found under reactions in Zoom. Please limit your audio questions to 30 seconds each to allow as many participants to ask questions as possible. Please limit your audio questions to the information presented on the slides and use the chat function to ask specific questions. Additionally, once our day is over, within the next couple of days, we anticipate sending you a transcript of all the Q&As that we answered and those we didn't answer at this time, and make sure that we do answer them when we send you our transcript of all the Q&As from all the participants. Okay. This slide, next slide, please. The next slide covers our DoD mission. And it tells you about what DoD does for our great nation. And our main priority is to provide military forces needed to deter war and to ensure our nation's security. The department engages in war fighting, humanitarian aid, peacekeeping, disaster relief, and homeland security, which, while simultaneously performing functions necessary to effectively and efficiently support our soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and their families. The Department of Defense employs approximately 1.4 million active duty members across the components, 865,000 selected reserves, and 245,000 individual ready reserve forces, and 735,000 appropriated and 126,000 non-appropriated civilians. Our military service members and civilians operate in every time zone, in every climate, and more than 450,000 of our employees serve overseas. Next slide, please. We spoke about this slide if you were in our first session. If not, I just wanted to do a quick overview. This is our public law, um, military spouse preference was in 19, it was evolved in 1986 under the public law 99-145, and it was codified in 10 USC 1784. And it directed the Secretary of Defense to establish a program that would provide employment preference to the spouses of active duty military members of the U.S. Armed Forces who relocate to accompany their military sponsors on a PCS move to a new duty station. With that, the military spouse program was preference program was created as a sub-program of the DoD priority placement program. So today we're going to go over some highlights of the program and how you can utilize your military spouse preference when you're applying to positions for the federal government. Next slide, please. To exercise your military spouse preference via the application-based process, a spouse must create a USA Jobs account, apply to a vacancy announcement, and that, and when you're in the announcement, you will see proof of marriage, PCS orders, and any other documents that might be identified on the vacancy announcement as needed to ensure that you have a complete application package. Once the announcement closes, a human resource specialist will make a determination on whether the military spouse meets the BQ criteria. If you are determined to be best qualified, the military spouse's name will be referred to the hiring official. If you are selected, you will receive a job offer through your email. So make sure you always monitor emails when you've applied to positions. You can also go into your USA Jobs account and check your status. Next slide, please. Please keep in mind that military spouse preference does not apply if the act of granting that preference would result in the displacement of a current employee of the activity and impact any employee already on the rolls. If granting that preference would result in a change to lower grade or separation of current, permanent, term, or temporary DoD employees. Additionally, preference is not applicable if granting it would violate statutes or regulations governing veterans' preference or nepotism. When spouses are within 6 months of PCSing with their sponsor to a new duty location, the spouse may be non-selected for permanent positions. And I'm sure many of you can guess why that is. Management doesn't want to get you on board, get you trained, and then have to start over again. So that's one of the reasons we have that rule in place. Next slide, please. Upon acceptance or declination of a permanent position, your MSP eligibility terminates. That's not to say that your non-competitive eligibility will terminate, just your military spouse preference will terminate at that duty location, and you may use it again when you PCS and report to a new duty station. Upon loss of spousal status, divorce, death of the sponsor or sponsor's retirement or separation from active duty, or failure to meet immediate appointability criteria. And that includes being able to report to duty when you're needed, making sure that you complete all of your pre-employment documents, your physical if required, and submission of your fingerprints. All of that is being able to be immediately appointable. Next slide, please. So on this particular slide, we're covering the differences. And if you were with us in the previous session, you saw this already. So you know that the non-competitive military spouse hiring authority is federal wide, whereas our program, the DoD Military Spouse Preference Program, is DoD only. The non-competitive appointing authorities does not extend any preference. With the DoD program for military spouse, you get preference when you're applying to a job announcement and you are determined to be best qualified. Under the non-competitive hiring authority, the eligibility is to be a spouse of an armed services member, spouse of a disabled Air Force member, or excuse me, armed forces member, or the spouse of a deceased armed forces member. For eligibility for our military spouse preference, you must not only be the spouse of an active duty member, you must also be relocating to a new duty station to be eligible. On the military spouse hiring authority, unlimited use. You can use that eligibility more than once. However, on the military spouse preference program, it's one time good deal. Accept, decline, however you do it, it's a one good time for that particular location. Next slide, please. And these are just some things that our military spouses are saying. And we show this slide to encourage you to network. Make sure you take the time to get to know people in your new duty location who can maybe help you navigate the employment programs that are available at that new duty location. Flexibility is always key, and you need to remain such, and don't get discouraged. We want to make sure that you don't give up and you give yourself an opportunity to learn as much as you can, to get out there and apply to jobs that you are willing to accept. One of the things that I have to mention here is that we don't want you to apply to a position that you don't want to say yes to, because sure as you do, that'll be the job that you get an offer for and you didn't want it, which means you will lose your military spouse preference. So use it wisely, because you only get that one opportunity to use it at each duty location. Next slide, please. These are some, on the next slide, you'll see some links to some very useful resources that can help you with your job search, whether it be looking for DoD jobs. Our DoD Civilian Careers website is available for military spouses and gives you some great information on how to apply for jobs. The USA Jobs Help Center is a good way to learn how to search for jobs and receive emails in your inbox on positions that you're interested in applying to. And lastly, the FAQs on the OPM website provides some great insight on how to apply for federal employment. that being said, next slide, we're gonna move to our audio question and answers. So remember, if you remember, I said raise your hand and we will let, and our helper, Thomasina, will open your mic and allow you to ask your questions verbally.
Hello, good morning. No, good morning. I'm in mountain time, so it's a different time zone.
No problem.
So my question is, how do we qualify for SES positions?
That is not something that we do in our office as far as the qualifications on the SES program. That is a separate program, and you have to do it through a separate avenue. I can research it for you and provide you with that information in our chat when we, if someone can do that in the background for me, or I will make sure you get that information as well.
Thank you, ma'am.
Any other any other questions? Someone else has their hand up. April.
Hi, yes, I have a question for you. What are the checks and balances for the local station that you're PCSing to, that they're actually using the spousal preference program correctly? Because I've heard many people say that, they know who got hired and they were not a military spouse that applied for that position.
Okay, well, one of the things that we do is we do evaluations, and we go through and we look at how the military spouse preference was utilized at that for a given position that's announced, and we do an inventory of that to make sure that that component is applying the rules across the board the same and giving everybody an opportunity to be considered as a military spouse as long as they meet the qualifications. Another thing that we do is every year we have to report statistics on military spouse employment and just how many spouses we've employed over a given 12-month period. And so we do monitor that as well to make sure that our components are doing what they need to do and are taking care of our spouses. And one other thing that we do is if we are noticing that there is a problem at a particular component, we will go in and talk to their component representatives about their MSP program to make sure that they are applying it appropriately and that each component is applying the program fairly and the same. And we have a question up from a Ms. Yamada.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Hi. I have a question. If you get hired through the MSP and you're not quite qualified all the way, but you just got hired because they needed you and you were a spouse, do they provide the training for you to do the job?
When you're using your military spouse preference eligibility, we're going to need you to be what we call BQ, best qualified. That means as qualified as the lowest ranking referable competitive candidate. We
Right.
generally don't look at you for entry level positions where you're going to need to utilize some training in order to be fully successful in that job. That's not to say that you're not able to apply using the non-competitive hiring authority for entry level or positions that do not require that BQ qualification standard that we have when you're using MSP.
I'm sorry, you were breaking up. I didn't really quite hear and your answer. I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Let me, I'm not sure why why it's breaking up so much. I believe your question was, can you apply for jobs that require a little bit of training to be able to be fully successful? Is that correct, or is that the gist of your question?
If they would hire you and train you, if they would provide the training in order for you to be successful in that job.
Okay, yes. Um,
And
typically,
you said no, not really, that they would only hire you if you met the qualifications and you would be able to do your job successfully. Is that what I'm getting from you?
yeah, as a military spouse preference eligible, we need you to meet a slightly higher standard than than a trainee coming in to learn and be taught on the job. But that's not to say you cannot get jobs like that. But using your preference, we need you to be above a minimally qualified applicant.
Okay. And what if because we've been at home supporting our spouse and raising the kids, we don't have that kind of training or education?
Um, Remember when we were talking about like volunteer work? You can do some volunteer work. You can find jobs that are available that you can do from home, maybe that will help bolster your career and your experience to get that entry level position. Remember, it doesn't have to be positions or skills that you learned in a federal job. It can be from any job. You can go out and get a job in the private sector that can give you experience that will equate to being able to be qualified for military spouse preference eligibility. That there are all kinds of ways to get that experience. It may not be that you start out with that experience. It may be that you apply not as a military spouse, but as a non-comp employee in an entry level position and work your way up. You can't be afraid to try new things and to work your way up in the program, because everything that you do is important and it will help you with your qualifications.
Thank you for your answer.
You're welcome. Felicia, I don't want to butcher your name.
Hello, how are you? It's Felicia. Can you hear me?
I apologize. Yes.
That's okay. That's okay. I just have one question for you regarding the LWOP, LWOP. How does that work if it's close to time for it to be expired and I'm unable to find a position at my new location? How does that work?
What you would need to do is contact your previous employer and ask if they're willing to extend you on leave without pay if it's getting ready to expire.
All right, thank you.
It's as simple as that. You're welcome. Sarah?
Hi, yes, thank you so much for your time. I just have a quick question. So my question is kind of based on the one answer before, but if you're just looking to break into the federal sector and don't have specific federal experience, or in my case, what I'm hoping to, go towards is contracting. But I do have 5 years of, private company experience and the education requirements. Would you say to avoid the MSP selection or process entirely and just go the non-comp way and kind of start where I would qualify, or do you have any suggestions on that?
You just told me that you have qualifications. You just said that you have experience, 5 years of private sector experience. That's experience that you can equate to a government job. Now, I don't know if that experience is something you want to continue to do, or if we have the equivalent in the federal service. But let's say you have administrative experience to get yourself in the foot in the door and utilize that administrative experience to be best qualified for a job. You, if you have no work experience, I could understand you wanting to maybe skip using your BQ MSP eligibility and go for your the non-comp, but you've said you have experience. Don't sell yourself short. Utilize that and use your MSP to get your foot in the door at maybe one of those lower graded positions. Just remember, only apply for those jobs that you want, that you'd be willing to accept, and you'd be good to go. But please don't sell yourself short because you don't actually have federal experience. All experience counts.
Okay, thank you for that. I also just want to build off that question quickly, but so, the federal positions, the qualifications are very specific. I guess what I'm struggling with is trying to correlate a lot of these positions with what my experience is. If I don't have that specific experience, but I have experience that would allow me to do that duty or that part of the job. I guess what I'm getting at is it feels like I have to kind of really start at the bottom just because I don't have those specific bulleted qualifications of certain GS levels, if that makes sense.
Yeah, there are some specialized experience requirements for certain types of jobs that I'm assuming you mean that those types of skills are not necessarily the skills that you have.
Mhm.
One thing that I might encourage you to do is go to the family. Oh gosh, it's changed since I've left this, since we're no longer active duty, but go to the Family Support Center on your installation. They should be able to help you with your resume and also help you maybe make some determinations on your qualifications and the types of jobs that you may apply for and be considered BQ for. I would recommend that you seek them out.
Okay, that's great advice. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. And April, you needed another opportunity?
Yes, ma'am. I put it in the chat, but I figured it's easier to ask the question directly is, why is there not an easier transition program for those that are already in the GS system that are PCSing to new duty stations like there used to be back in 15, 16-ish, when you could go to the new DP or the new whatever the HR department you want to call, whatever you call it now, where you could actually go, you would run your resume through their program. They had a list of all job openings on that particular installation. and they would put you directly into those. Why did we get rid of that easy, streamlined process, especially for those that are already in the system? Because I've been told multiple times through these past 2 duty stations that, oh, just go apply on USA Jobs. You're gonna be taken care of. Or I've even been told directly, you don't even have to move with your spouse if you're not comfortable for losing your GS position.
I missed the last part of your question, but I think I have the gist. And back a few years ago, our we heard from a lot of different folks that our program was too limiting for you to have to go in, show your resume, and you only receive consideration for up to 5 skill sets, 5 GS series, where you might be qualified for multiple different a number of series, but we're limiting you to the five to five. But you're still having to apply. We would send you a notice and tell you, okay, this job is open. You may be qualified. Go ahead and apply, and you'll be determined whether you're best qualified or not. When we changed the process to the application process, the intent was to give MSPs, allow them to apply for any job that they think they were best qualified for to get and to help them get a position. You weren't limited to those 5 series. You weren't limited to the grade levels that we were limiting you to when we were doing it the other way. So the thought behind it was, we're going to empower you military spouses to take control of your destiny, and you choose how you want to use your military spouse preference instead of us choosing how you use it. And that was why it was changed. The intent was not to make it harder for you to get employment. The intent was to empower you to help yourself in the best light for you appears. And additionally, the military spouses, if you go into a local HR, they should be helping you still. They may not be counseling you and taking your resume from you, but they can give you advice on applying for positions and information on how to apply. Okay, so we're gonna leave the chat open to allow you to still submit your questions via chat. And we're gonna close out the audio portion of our presentation at this time. Thank you for all your great questions, and I hope we were able to answer them.
Yes, I'm here.
Were you able to do anything else with that?
No, so when I went back in on my end and played it, it played perfectly fine for me. I think when I wanted to let you know, and maybe we could throw that in at the next session, is because we have a lot of people, now it's not that many people, we're under 100 right now, but depending on people's bandwidths and VPNs and internet accesses, and depending on how many windows you have up while you're, working, that also plays a part in the internet.
We're on Zoom. Let's go to Teams.
Okay.
Go to Teams.
Hello, everyone. We will start back with our presentation again at the top of the hour. In the meantime, we're furiously working behind the scenes to answer the questions that you've placed in the chat. Please be patient with us as we get to you as we're able to. Thanks for being with us today.
So Thomasina, we'll try that PNR video again, okay, at the top of the hour, please.
Okay, Bobby, I wanted to ask you.
Monica, close your Zoom mic. Quality employment. Without your support, it would be impossible for us to maintain our troops and ensure our national security. One of the primary challenges among military spouses is to build and maintain a career in a way that you aren't faced with the prospect of starting over with every PCS. Searching for job opportunities with the federal government is a good place to start as you begin or continue your career journey. Federal jobs offer affordability, and employers will often know your specific needs. You may even get preference when you apply for Defense Department civilian jobs. Federal agencies can use the military spouse non-competitive hiring process to fill a position on a temporary or permanent basis. You're eligible if you're the spouse of an active duty service member, of a service member who's incurred 100% disability while on active duty, or a spouse of a serviceman who was killed while on active duty. You may also be able to take advantage of the priority placement program, which gives preference to military spouses applying for certain Defense Department positions. You can apply through your local civilian personnel or human resources office. The Department's Spouse Education and Career Opportunity website, known as MySECO, is also a valuable resource that provides education and career guidance to military spouses worldwide. Among other things, MySECO allows you as a military spouse to access more than 600,000 employment opportunities provided by our more than 540 military spouse employment partnership employer partners. And don't forget, the DoD provides spouses with career coaches free of charge through the Sector Career Center. Another place to look to find jobs that is right for you is the Military One Source Managing Your Career Sector page, which, among numerous other resources, provides help with transferring professional licenses and certifications to another state or country. In closing, I would like to thank you all again for your participation here today. When our military spouses thrive, so does our military and our nation. Thank you very much.
I couldn't get a straight answer from the OPM people. I'm in the DoD one now, so I'm gonna see what they're gonna talk about. Maybe, maybe they'll know.
No worries, I should start getting deleted.
May just give up on this thing. It's very hard to, it's just not,
You need a one-on-one way to reach out to somebody, you ask that question or a whole question.
maybe, I don't know. Let's see. It's like, they keep giving these presentations. I thought that we were here to network and ask questions and talk to people, but they just keep sharing the same crap you can read online. Hopefully I'm muted.
Mr. Greenwald. Mr. Greenwald. You are on the screen, sir. Oh, we are trying to conduct an event here for military spouses. If you have a question, you can come on when the audio portion comes on, when this individual finished presentation. Yes, we are presenting the same information for different people as we go through this. Okay, stuff that you can see online, you are correct. But if you got specific questions, please wait until this individual finished with her presentation, and we'll answer your question. And mute your mic, please, because we can hear the conversation that's going on. Thank you, sir. Were you able to hear me? Your mic is muted now. Okay. Okay. Go ahead, Ms. Davis.
Please tell her to unmute me, please. I cannot.
Hello, everyone. I hope you all can see me because definitely I cannot see myself, but that's okay. If you all can see me, that is great. Hi, my name is Geneva Davis, and I'm a workforce shaping administrator, and I'm with the Employment and Compensation Office with the Defense Civilian Personnel Advisory Service, known as DC-PAS. Now, what I can say is that I was a military spouse for about a year and a half. And the reason why is because I was an active duty member, and also I was married to an active duty member. And at that time, especially when I was overseas, I used to look at the military spouses and say, how can you do it? You were really holding it down. I was at a base where the active duty members always stayed in the field. And, you know, they may have just gotten there. And then the military spouse, you know, here comes the truck with the household goods. And then they had to get the children into school. And I kept saying, there's no way I can do that. But I do applaud you, even seeing that overseas, of what you all do. So that's why we want to talk to you all about the Military Spouse Preference Program, known as the MSP. Can you go to the next slide, please? Here we're going to go through 3 sessions. We've already did our 1 o'clock session, and now I'm starting the 2 o'clock session. So what we're going to do, I'm going to introduce, first of all, I'll give you a little history about MSP. All right. It's going to take about maybe 15, 20 minutes for that presentation. And then what we're going to do is we're going to open it up for questions and answers. Now, let me just let you know, we have some professionals here as well. I'm going to open it up for audio. So I'll try my best to answer any questions. All you have to do is just go down to that reaction button, raise a hand. I will call on you and you can ask me questions. But also take advantage of the chat. We have professional folks here that will answer your questions as well. We all also have representatives from different components that can answer specific questions for you from, like, for Air Force, for example, and for Navy. So we are here for you, okay? So after my presentation, hopefully what you're going to get or understanding of is MSP, the program itself. How do you utilize, how do you exercise your priority status, and the difference between the military spouse hiring authority, non-competitive hiring authority, and the MSP. All right, next slide, please. Let me just talk about the Department of Defense. DoD is America's largest agency. And as it states here, our mission is to provide the military forces needed to deter war and ensure our national security. But our major elements here are Army, Navy, Marine Corps, Air Force, and the Space Forces. And one thing that DoD does is that they support, like, disaster relief, things that are going on down in Florida and things that are going on in Puerto Rico. The DoD is always a part of that. But the main thing they're here is to support our soldiers, our sailors, our airmen, and our Marines as well. Also here, the Department of Defense, we talk about how many people are employed. Do you see that it's approximately 1.4 million active duty military members across the components? Also, you have appropriated funds and non-appropriated funds, civilian employees. You also have folks that are overseas. Now, forget about our military members overseas and also the civilians overseas. But one thing I can say about the Department of Defense, they are definitely concerned about our military spouses. And I think we do a very good job in regards to our military spouses. During the first sessions, I did hear that some people are not doing a very good job, but because where I work under the priority placement program, we definitely care about our military spouses. And if situations do come up, like I heard at the first session, we definitely need to know about it. Okay, so what we're going to do is definitely get into the brief of the military spouse first. Let me just give you a little introduction about how MSP came about. It was in 1986 when the Department of Defense was directed to establish a employment preference for the military spouses of active duty military members of the armed forces, which include a military spouse relocate how they see that military spouse became a program. Now, again, yes, we do that when we talk about workforce shaping. You may think about reduction of force, but I'm a part of the priority placement program as well. So as a military spouse, what makes you eligible, and that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to show you the eligible, or how that process worked for you as a military spouse, when you need to exercise that preference through the priority placement position. Okay, so hopefully at the end of my presentation, I am going to show you the difference between the military spouse non-competitive hiring authority versus the military spouse preference. So here on this slide, it talks about our program itself. What gives you the priority consideration? Again, we say as a spouse, as an active duty military member, when you see a position okay, that is being filled under competitive procedures, okay? And as we listed earlier through OPM, there was showing how you can go out there and apply for position, for federal position. If it's a procedure in the priority placement program, and it seems like we had control, but now we're saying, we're gonna allow you to drive your own career. Okay, so when we changed this back, it was in 2019 when that change was made. We thought it was a good change. Of course, it was a little nerve-wracking for us, but I noticed that it actually helps you with your MSP. Again, being married to being on those orders. Back in the day when orders used to come out, they used to list the dependents on there. Okay, those orders now that I see just say dependent. Okay, you have to meet all the pre-employment criteria and be immediately appointable based on that vacancy announcement. Okay, whatever it tells you that you have to upload, make sure that you adhere to that. And lastly, you must rank among the best qualified for that DoD position. Excuse me. Next slide, please. All right. So how do you exercise your MSP? First of all, you must go into USA Jobs and create an account. Earlier, OPM showed you how you can go about doing that. You must go in and create an account. Then go in and apply. By the time you apply for a position, complete that self-certification checklist. Just because you did it one time and it's in USA checklist, okay? And the only thing I'm going to say to you, be honest when you are answering those questions. Include all the pertinent documents. A narrative resume. OPM talks about how you go in and you build up that resume. It's important that you submit an accurate, okay, resume, all right? Proof of marriage. Make sure you have a copy of your marriage certificate. And of course, those PCS orders. Of this that's applying along with you, okay? Agency sends you an offer, okay, and say you have to respond back within 24 hours. You must do that. And if not, then you will not be referred for that position, okay? You may be referred, but you won't get that job offer. Because if they tell you 24 hours, you must respond within 24 hours, all right? Also, information is available at the DoD Civilian Career website, which is listed below, okay? Let's go to the next slide. Military spouse preference, we have special policies. Now, MSP would not apply an employee being separated or being changed to lower grade. If that happens, we cannot grant that preference. Okay. Also, we won't be able to grant that preference if it violates statute, okay, or regulation governing veterans' preference or nepotism. If a military spouse sponsor is getting ready to PCS within 6 months, okay, of you applying for that position, that hiring official do not have to select you, or that HR does not have to refer you. And you got to understand, managers go through a lot trying to hire individuals for their position. So to hire you, and you only have 4 or 5 months left before you rotate. All right. So we had to come up with some type of policy to say, if it's 6 months of that tour rotation date, then you don't have to be selected, will not be selected for that position. Okay. Next slide, please. When does your MSP terminate? Upon acceptance or declination. Hey, you accept a position, that's a good thing. All right. Then your termination ends. If we offer you a position and you decline that position, okay, your MSP terminates at that time. Okay. If you decide to go into the NAF office, non-appropriated fund, or go into the military exchange service and apply for a position and you get hired and it's a permanent position, you didn't even exercise your MSP because you don't exercise it under NAF or the military exchange, it will terminate at that time. Because what we are trying to do is find you employment, even if it's at the NAF or the military exchange. Okay. If for any reason that you lose spousal status through a divorce, through death, okay, your sponsor retires or they separated for active duty, then your preference terminates. Failure to meet immediate employability, all right? If they have certain employment requirements for you, say for example, they said you have to take a physical, okay, or you have to take a drug test, and you're not doing it, or you decide not to do it, then that can terminate. Okay, your MS. Talk about the differences between the military spouse hiring authority and the military spouse preference program. There is a difference, okay, between the two. So let's look at the military spouse hiring authority. And OPM talked about that earlier today. Just know that that is federal wide, okay? When we talk about military spouse preference, it is for DOD only. Okay, it's for DOD only. With military preference. Now, what it does do is give you eligibility, okay, for you to apply for that position. Okay, it gives you eligibility. When you use MSP preference, what it does, it extends preference in hiring if you are determined best qualified. Okay, so the spouses must be appointable under our hiring authority. A lot of times, we try to tell our spouses that when you apply under MSP, yes, you're going to receive priority consideration. Okay, you will receive priority consideration if you are determined best qualified. But you must understand, because a lot of times we may get phone calls and say, hey, I applied for a position. Why didn't I get picked up for that position? You got to understand there's more than just one spouse out there that are applying for positions. Okay. And when I talked earlier, I said about positions being filled competitively. Managers have the option to hire non-competitively as well. Okay, so you need to understand that. You have to compete competitively. If management decides to go non-competitively, they may do so. Okay. Also with the military spouse hiring authority, the eligibility, okay, is for spouses of armed forces active duty members, okay, spouses of disabled armed forces members, and spouses of deceased armed forces members. Under the MSP, the eligibility that spouse must relocate, okay, or accompany their sponsor through a PCS move, okay? So you have to relocate with your sponsor to exercise, okay, that preference. If you decide not to do that at that time, okay, say your sponsor just goes ahead of you, then that's okay. You cannot apply while you're still somewhere else. Please understand that. But when you get to where that location is with your sponsor, within that commuting area of your sponsor, then you can still apply for a position and then exercise your preference at that time. Okay, we go back to the use. Okay, spouses of spouses of activity for duty only. Under MSP, it's one time per PCS move. Okay, which is really good. If you exercise your priority consideration, you get hired. That's a good thing. Okay. A lot of times, because you, as a military spouse, you move often, sometimes within not even 3 years, and you have to PCS, then you go to another location, then you can exercise that again. Okay. So those are the differences between the military spouse hiring authority and the military spouse preference program. One thing you got to remember, MSP is for DOD only. Okay. Next slide, please. Here on this slide is like, what are the military spouses saying? And one thing that I picked up early on the first session, which I thought was really good, and I think it was Air Force that had stressed it as well, networking is key. Okay, and that is what the MSA president said as well. When you get to a certain location, if you find other spouses, hey, do some networking. What did you do? Okay, to actually to get picked up in the federal purchase. Okay, what did you do? Okay, also be flexible. I like that because yeah, it may get frustrating, and I heard that as well. I heard that as well. That it was very frustrating for some folks. Okay, excuse me. I'm sorry, guys. Okay, hold on. Okay, yeah, I got. Okay, so be flexible and be willing to take a job that that you may necessarily not want. One thing I want to say to you all, especially when I got out of the military, only thing I really wanted to do is get my feet in the door. Okay, that is exactly what I wanted to do. And if it had to wanted to get my foot in the door. And once you get
This meeting is being recorded.
okay, and once you get your big toe in there, then you can get your feet, you want your left foot in and then your right foot in, and then you can go anywhere. Okay? Next slide, please. Here is just some opportunity and some resources for you. As OPM had stated today, USA Jobs, I think, is a great search for DOD for federal positions. Definitely great to go out there and look for federal jobs. But here are some others that can be very helpful to you all if you want to go out there and look for any type of employment opportunities. But USA Jobs, I think, is very, very good as well. We got our DOD civilian career website as well. That is good. Okay, in our job help center. Okay. All right. And the next slide is just going to be questions, I'm assuming. Next slide, please. All right. What I'm going to do at this time, okay, again, I can't see myself. I really can't see myself, but hopefully you all can see me. And if there are any questions, all you can do right now, there's a reaction button there. If you go ahead and you can raise your hand, okay? And I'll try my best to answer that question for you. Or go into the chat, okay? And I see that you all are asking questions in the chat. All right, Meredith Johnson, is your hand up?
Yes, ma'am. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am, I can hear you. How can I help you?
Okay, thank you. First, thanks for this presentation. I appreciate it. I have a question about what you said in terms of the preference not being able to be used until you have physically relocated with the sponsor. And specifically, I'm looking at the DoD Priority Placement Handbook, Chapter 14.
Yes.
Paragraph C3, where it talks about that, how you cannot exercise your preference. You can only do it up to 30 days prior to the report date. And then if you do not initially relocate, you cannot exercise your preference until you reside in the commuting area. I'm a spouse. I'm also a DoD civilian, approximately 13 years of experience, and also have experience hiring within DoD. And 30 days is just not realistic to do an application, referral, interview, offer process. Do you think that DoD would consider aligning this 30 days to equal maybe the average time that it takes to do a USA Jobs hire, which in my experience is, more like 4 to 6 months, especially since we have heard in these question and answers that DoD doesn't have a agency-wide mandate for the number of days that civilians or military spouses are authorized leave without pay in order to do a PCS. And so, we either have to break our service in order to PCS and be eligible to use the preference, or stay behind and then hope that you can get a job at the follow-on location on your own without preference, which is what I've had to do. I've never actually been able to utilize party placement preference in 13 years.
Oh, wow. I'm not for sure. And I think where the 30 days come from is because usually around that time is when, I guess when you PCS is usually like 30 days prior. I'm not for sure if they will rethink that, ma'am. That is something that you can actually, we can maybe think about it. We can always bring that up. But right now, for you to exercise, I'm saying your preference, and we're saying that you have to relocate. But what you're saying, you are a federal employee as well. Is that correct, Ms. Meredith? Ms. Johnson, are you there? Yes, ma'am. So as a federal employee, ma'am, I understand you, we're just talking about MSP, all right? Military spouse preference. You have to relocate with your sponsor. What prevents you for applying as a federal employee? Okay, it doesn't stop you for applying as a federal employee. Okay, I really wish you could come back and talk to me. That could have been. Okay. Trying to see if there's any other hands up. I cannot see that for some reason. Let's see. Thomasina, are you there?
Hi, ma'am. Oh, sorry. I'm off mute. I accidentally muted myself, and then I couldn't get
I'm
back on.
talking to you.
So my answer is yes, I am a federal employee. However, I've tried to utilize the military spouse. You said there's the two options where it's the direct hire, or versus the eligibility. So even if there's a hiring preference to prioritize military spouses ahead of other applicants, that would help for spouses who are already employed. But that's still something we wouldn't be able to utilize unless we, left our current job and then PCS'd and then tried to use the preference. So it's just, I guess it's okay to get in the door, but if the goal being maintain employment and not have to quit a job every time and then have a period of unemployment, especially since some of these tours can be short, a year, 2 years, and 6 months of that might be just going through the USA jobs hiring process. It just seems that if you could get a head start and start utilizing the preference, earlier than 30 days, because sometimes we get orders perhaps 6 months before a PCS. If we could have the ability to start utilizing that preference earlier, then it could make the PCS smoother and not have to debate whether you stay behind or a company.
Okay, we understand. And I know we're recording this, and we can definitely take that into consideration. We really appreciate that, Meredith.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Emily? Is Emily there? Do you have a question? Okay. What about Ms. Hook? Ms. Lisa Hook, do you have a question, ma'am? Now I can see myself.
Okay, now I'm unmuted.
There you go.
Hi, so I know this presentation is about military spouse employment preference, but I think a lot of military spouses who have gone through these processes have some really great ideas for how to improve military spouse recruitment and maybe more of a key part of that, retention. So I really appreciate Meredith's comment about the 30 days before PCS. I previously commented about a standardized LWOP when we're PCSing, a standardized terminal LWOP across DoD. But I guess I'm just wondering, I've written letters to SecDef that don't go answered. How do we kind of get out of this echo chamber of military spouses complaining on Facebook about breaking into federal government service and actually make some key recommendations for how to improve these processes? And I will note that I'm also a current DoD employee and I'm a remote employee. So this really isn't something that I need right now because I have that flexibility with my current employer.
Yeah, so really you just want to get some of those ideas of that. And I know as a military spouse, you all have great ideas. And we definitely would like to hear them. What I would suggest, again, we are definitely recording this. And what we can do for our office, because again, I work in the project placement program. And what we can do is, I think, and I guess the best way we can do it, if we could get, I'm trying to think, how can we get your questions? This is what I can ask you to do, Emily. If you can put that in the chat for us and let us take a look at that when we all come back together with our team here at DC Pass and see what we can do to maybe hear more of the voices from the military spouses, okay? Because who knows better than you all what is going on out there? And a lot of times our office, we always thought that we had control over it, but we are just hearing some things that are different. And we are definitely concerned about some of the things that we hear are going on, but we definitely would like to hear from you. So I suggest that if it's some way that, and we do hopefully get everyone's email address, to see how we can reach out to the military spouses and just to see what are your concerns and then see what DC Pass can do as a whole. I mean, that's what I would say. Hopefully my boss will agree as well. I don't know if I'm putting too much on there, but I think it is important that we hear from our military spouses who is best to know what is happening. Because again, when you all did come into the HRO and you were able to register through priority placement, we pretty much had control over that. But now, since it's gone to the application-based process, we really don't know too much. We know some things, okay? But if there is something that is going on or some suggestions that you would like to see, I would just say, can you please just maybe put something in the chat, some way how we can get in contact with you and just say, okay, Emily, what suggestions did you have? Or Ms. Johnson, for example, I can remember that name as well. And maybe we can go that route.
I will definitely do that. And I'll drop my my Navy email in the chat as well.
Yeah, I think that would help. Okay.
Thanks.
You're welcome. Ms. Hook, I know I asked you next. She was there. Okay. All right. Well, let's just go on to Carla. Ms. Carla, I see your hand up. Do you have a question, ma'am?
Hi, so my question kind of it's kind of a spinoff of the last two spouses that were asking questions. So would that still qualify as far as if you're looking strictly for a remote position, you wouldn't be able to get a position within 6 months of the ending of a tour?
What we said in that slide, if you know that your sponsor is getting ready to PCS and it's within 6 months, we are saying that, and we may know that you may not be selected for that position because you have to understand that management is looking for someone permanently. And in reality, you're only going to be there temporarily because you're getting ready to relocate with your sponsor.
Okay, and that's thank you. That's also regarding any kind of remote positions as well?
No, we're not talking about remote positions.
Okay.
Let's talk about when we say remote, and the terminology for remote is that position can be placed anywhere.
Oh, correct.
Okay, that's what I mean about remote. Because if you're sitting right now in San Francisco and there's a vacancy out there that said this position can be remote, and sometimes it may say negotiable. Okay. You can then exercise your preference. Okay, because we're not saying a specific location. Okay, we're just saying remote. And in the environment that we're in right now, a lot of positions are being announced remotely or virtually or negotiable. Okay, because a lot of folks are not coming into the office and a lot of folks are working from home. So again, if you're out there looking and you see a vacancy announcement that said this position is remote, it'd be remote. You as a military spouse can exercise that preference. Again, now, if you haven't used your spouse preference when you got to the location that you're in now.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Margarita. Did I see Margarita?
Hello. Okay, I just wanted to real quick confirm it. We can ask any question, right? It doesn't have to be about the presentation, or it does?
Well, if it's anything other than what I went over, you can go ahead and put it in the chat because really we're trying to focus on MSP employment. We are HR specialists and some of us don't work in operations, and some of those HR questions we may be able to answer. But if it's with the MSP, but give it a shot and we'll see. What do you have? Margarita?
Okay. Okay, well, the question is not about MSP, that's why. So if I can go ahead and still ask it on the chat, if anyone else can answer it.
Okay, appreciate that. All right, Desiree. Desiree? Hi, Desiree.
Hi, good afternoon. I have a couple of questions regarding MSP. I wanted to see how health services was involved. I am a nursing graduate from 2019 when COVID hit, so I don't have much experience. And I was wondering if there was any areas that that I could maybe do volunteer work so I could get experience. And would I have to go through a hiring process because of that? Or is there a way that MSP program can help me gather experience?
No,
So I don't
we
know. I don't
don't.
know.
No, ma'am, we definitely don't go that far when we're talking about military spouse preference as far as giving you or helping you to get experience or doing voluntary work. Again, with the military spouse preference, what it does is give you eligibility to apply for positions that are being competed through the federal government. And as being a nursing assistant, have you looked out in USA Jobs to see if there are any nursing positions out there? Have you looked? Have you taken that opportunity to do that?
Yes, ma'am. But as for the moment, I am in Puerto Rico. And it's very limited. So I just wanted to see my children are stationed at Fort Buchanan, and I wanted to see if I could like somehow integrate, you know, participation at the base somehow.
Yeah, but again, you have to remember the criteria for exercising that MSP. All right. Of course, married to an active duty member, relocating with that spouse. Well, what can we do? Again, let me ask you this question. Do you have any other eligibility besides the MSP? Have you ever been a federal employee before?
Yes, I worked 11 years in DHS.
Okay, all right. So you have another eligibility. You have MSP, you have reinstatement rights because you're not a federal employee right now, correct?
Correct.
But you were at one time, and so most likely you did that for some years. So you have reinstatement right back into the federal government, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so that's an eligibility for you. So that's what I would do. Don't give up. If you want to look at positions, if it's in Fort Buchanan, then go out there and see if there's any positions. And when you look at a vacancy announcement, it will tell you, it says the area of consideration, people that are eligible or they're considering for the position. If you see reinstatement eligible, that is you. Okay. That is you as well as a military spouse preference. Let's think about anything else. Have you ever been in the military?
No, ma'am.
No, okay, because again, as a veteran, it can be open if folks have disabilities, like a 30% or more, or could have been in the military like me for maybe 8 or 9 years, you know, and without having a disability rating. We're just looking at types of eligibility that you have, and right now I've told you have two. You have the military spouse preference, and you have reinstatement eligibility because you were a federal employee at one time. And so when you're looking at positions out there, look for that AOC as well, you know, reinstatement eligibles, okay? And definitely look for that nursing field because I know that is a need, okay? Definitely out there for nurses, doctors, of course, as well. And again, one thing I want to say to you, because I'm looking at your face, is don't give up. Don't get frustrated with it. Don't just say it's got to be. So now I'm just telling you have that reinstatement eligibility. So just don't look for MSP. Look for reinstatement. And also go out there and look for positions that are open to all U.S. citizens.
Okay.
Okay, so that means that you don't even have to be a federal employee. Now, one thing I can say about those positions, usually the veterans, I'm just saying, I'm just going to be honest with you, a lot of veterans apply for those positions, and veterans do get priority for those positions that are open.
I understand.
You know, I can just be honest with you about that, but I still will try.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, sounds
I still
good.
will not. Okay. So
Thank you.
to all sources, reinstatement for you and MSP.
All right,
Okay.
thanks. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, Brittany, how can I help you?
Hi, give me just a second.
Hey,
I'll start video. Okay, hi.
Hey, Brittany, how you doing?
Good, how are you?
I'm doing good.
I have a question about, so I was NAF for a year at my previous base. I worked 2 years as a GS5. I got past my 2-year mark, so I should be out of the probation period. And then we PCS'd. And I got on leave without pay status, as I haven't been on too long, but I heard other people talking about that. And when I got to my gaming base, as soon as I found childcare, I started applying, and I was getting referred, but I was not getting any interviews to quite a few jobs. And I went to civilian personnel, and I was like, hey, is there anything you can do? I'm on leave without pay. I've literally PCS. Is there some kind of transfer program? And months went by, and I finally got, like, is there a sanctified transfer program?
Sanctified transfer program. No, ma'am. But let me just ask this question. So when you're saying that, so what was actually happening, Brittany, when you were PCSing? So you saying you just wasn't getting referred, or you just wasn't getting interviewed? You were getting interviewed.
I was getting referred, but no interviews. And when I talked to civilian personnel, they told me, because I was in, I'm in the medical field as well, to talk to the med group and see if the med group at our new base would like to hire. And they're in a hiring freeze. So I started branching out, trying to make connections other places, and I still, I don't know what else to do except if there's like a transfer program. Is that what PPP is?
Well, see, you again, what I'm talking about was the military spouse preference. It's a sub-program of the priority placement program.
Okay.
Okay. So you exercise that preference, and it is part of the PPP.
Okay.
Okay. So when you're applying for a position, so I'm assuming you are doing that, although hopefully you are doing that.
I'm applying MSP, paperwork, PCS orders, marriage license for every single application.
Okay, so that is good. Okay, now we just need to understand, and again, just like I'm going to tell everyone else, do not get discouraged, okay? Because you got to understand that there are other spouses out there applying, there are other federal employees applying, there are veterans that are applying, and I want to make this clear that managers have a choice between non-competitive selections as well as competitive. You could have been referred, and also those non-competitive folks could have been referred as well. And managers could have went ahead and selected someone non-competitively. Okay, that could have happened. I cannot speak.
There's no guarantee to get an interview, or when you PCS, I guess there is no guarantee for spouses to continue employment.
It is not. It's just, can I say, it's a hit and miss. It all depends on that agency, what they are applying for. If you get referred, Brittany, that is a good thing, okay? And that's what we want to see happen, that you get referred. If managers do not interview, they do not have to interview. That is something they do not have to do. If you were referred as best qualified, that is just my question. You know, if you were referred, and most likely if you exercise MSP, you may have been referred best qualified. I'm just asking, do you know if you're telling me you was referred, that means you were referred as a military spouse preference, correct?
Mm-hmm.
I'm assuming. And what branch was this? Was this
Air Force?
Army, Air Force, Navy?
Air Force.
It was under Air Force. Okay. Can I ask you to do this, Brittany? Because yes, we do have an Air Force rep, and this is what I want to know, that situation. And I know that Air Force rep is here as well. Okay. And if you could, in that chat, and just say, and hopefully the person is hearing me, I want you to explain that to our Air Force rep, and maybe that person can maybe go into more of what happened, because I really can't speak for Air Force. But if you can explain, maybe in that chat, maybe the Air Force rep can maybe find out more for you, or maybe what happened. If you do that, because we do have a representative here from the Air Force.
Okay.
Because
And
I want to, I'm very curious. I'm very curious myself.
And I've actually went back to civilian personnel, and I'm having meetings with one of the MSG members of the base where I am trying to help military and family readiness create a larger military spouse preference at my gaining base. So if nothing else, I feel like I'm trying to help other spouses in this process.
And Brittany, where are you located?
Warner Robins, Robins Air Force Base.
Robins Air Force Base. Okay, we're very familiar with Robins Air Force Base. Definitely familiar with that. And so if you could, Brittany, put that in the chat, and I would definitely like for the Air Force rep to maybe respond to you in regards to your question and your experience that you had dealing with the Air Force.
Awesome.
That would be very welcome.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you, Brittany. Hey, Shay. Okay, we got about maybe 2 more minutes, guys. Let's go ahead, Shay. What you got for me? Be nice to me, Shay, okay? Okay, come off of mute, Shay. You're laughing. Come on. You're on mute.
I'm sorry.
There you go.
Thank you, ma'am.
There you go.
So one of my huge issues was that I was having such a difficult time as we PCS to, especially with COVID, to be able to obtain employment, on the federal side. Long story short, in the mix of trying to get employed using my spousal preference, he retired. And now we just recently moved to another location where he's 100% permanent in total. I don't know if any eligibility still apply to me because I was federal before. I just don't know.
Okay, so you were federal before. So do you know, Shay, if you have reinstatement rights?
Oh, yes, ma'am. So I have reinstatement rights. I'm Schedule A, a couple of other different things. But what
Shay.
Yes.
You have it all, Shay.
I don't get it. I mean, I'll get referred, but then I hear nothing else back. One of my main issues I had was that I had to navigate outside of the GS system to get the upper mobility that I needed, like as far as some positions. So I took a position outside of the agency that kind of paid me almost double than what I was making. And so now when I apply for positions, because I was only a 9 then, but my positions were 13, like the equivalency in the position that I did in the salary. Now they saying I'm ineligible because of my SF50 said one thing. And I'm like, how am I ineligible? I've been out the government system for 3 years.
Exactly. What agency was you applying for? What component was that?
DOD.
For okay. Oh, okay. But yeah, Shay, but definitely you have so many definite eligibilities for positions that you can apply for. Now, again, it may not be working out for you, but again, only thing I can say to you is just don't give up, especially if you have Schedule A. You definitely have that. You have reinstatement rights. Again, you can exercise the military non-competitive hiring appointment that they were talking about there, because you were saying that your sponsor is 100% disabled.
Yes, ma'am. He just got 100% PNT.
Yeah, definitely. And again, one thing about the military, I was trying to give the comparison, is that gives you an eligibility. It doesn't give you spouse preference, like the DOD, but at least you can get on somebody's cert if you're seeing a position out there and just say, hey, I'm going under the military non-competitive hiring authority. Okay.
But I think the SF50 is what's causing the problems, because they looked at what I was 3 years ago, and then my position that I have now that I well, not now, because I got another job on the civilian side, but I'm trying to get back into the government side so I can, still be adding to my retirement. But I keep getting feedback. Well, you weren't eligible because your SF50 showed that you were 9 and you're qualified for 12. And I'm like, but I've been in 12 equivalency and title for 3 years.
Okay, but do you have a copy of your SS50 that states or show that you was a GS12?
No. So no, I was a 9 on the government side, but I took a civilian job to get the upper mobility, get the pay, to get the experience. And so when I applied for this they keep saying because I was a 9, and I'm like, that was 3 years ago.
Yeah, but that's how it works in the federal government, though, Shay.
But I thought if you was out, I thought if you was out of it, for like 2 years, then you come back, then it's like, I'm thinking, oh, it's totally different. Like I didn't think that they were going to use an old SF50 when you had upper mobility positions to use as a disqualifier for jobs that equals you now.
Yeah, because you were saying the last federal position that you had, you were a GS9, and then you gained that other experience outside of the federal government, correct?
Yes.
That you're saying could have equaled up to the GS12 position, what you're saying, but that's not how the federal government works. They will look at your last SS50 of the position that you held. If it was a GS9 position, then they will have to go for that. Yeah, that experience maybe will help you if you were a 9 to maybe apply for an 11 position. Okay, to get open mobility to the 11, okay, or GS9 to an 11, but maybe definitely not for the 12, but maybe for the 11. So that's maybe what you need to be focusing on, maybe looking at a GS11 position instead of a 9, because they can look at your experience and say, okay, you did held that 9 at least 1 year, maybe that you were a 9 for 3 or 4 years, okay, which can make you eligible for a GS11 position. And maybe that's why they're saying, no, you can't for a 12. Okay, so you can't jump that high is what they're saying.
So I contacted OPM and they gave me the regulation that showed that if you're out of the system, if you're no longer a DOD employee for more than 24 months, then that reinstatement does not have to correlate with that. The OPM, when I called them, she gave me the regulation on where to find it. And I submitted that to the HR people and they got kind of quiet.
Okay. And I'm getting quiet too, because I was that it helped them as well.
Yeah, I contacted them because I said it doesn't make sense. What if I was a GS5 10 years ago, and then it tells me that I gotta have, an SF50 from my last time I was employed, and then you're using that one. But I'll send you a chat so other people can get some discussion in, and then we'll go from there.
Chat, because we definitely have to shut down everybody. Carl, Marie, definitely, if you can put your answer in the chat. Samantha, if you could please put your in the chat, because we have to start our next session. I am so sorry. Okay. All right. So at this time, okay, if Thomasina, if the ones that had their hands up, I do apologize. It is 3 o'clock. We must start our next session again. And I will turn it over to Mr. Ernest Rivera.
Thomasina, you can unmute Ernest Rivera so he can get started. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. My name is Joseph. Let me first thank all the military spouses in attendance for investing their careers the same way you invest and support your service. I also want to say how much I appreciate federal agencies who have come to this hearing. By sharing what you have to offer, you're helping the military community thrive. As the Undersecretary of Defense for Personnel and Readiness, I know how crucial it is for military spouses to find career fulfillment, achieve financial stability, and in the process, build strong relationships. Success for our military is directly related to the strength and stability of our family. Stability of our families is dependent on military spouses having access to quality employment. Without your support, it would be impossible for us to maintain our troops and ensure our national security. One of the primary challenges among military spouses is to build and maintain a career in a way that you aren't faced with the prospect of starting over every PCS. Searching for job opportunities with the federal government is a good place to start as you begin or continue your career journey. Federal jobs offer affordability, and employers will often know your specific needs. You may even get preference when you apply for Defense Department's civilian jobs. Federal agencies can use the military spouse non-competitive hiring process to fill a position on a temporary or permanent basis. You're eligible if you're the spouse of an active duty service member, of a service member who was secured 100% disability while on active duty, or a spouse of a service member who was killed while on active duty. You may also be able to take advantage of the priority placement program, which gives preference to military spouses applying for certain Defense Department positions. You can apply through your local civilian personnel or human resources office. The Department of Spouse, Education, and Career Opportunity website, known as MySecco, is also a valuable resource that provides education and career guidance to military spouses worldwide. Among other things, MySecco allows you as a military spouse to access more than 600,000 employment opportunities provided by our more than 540 military spouse employment partnership employer partners. And don't forget, the DoD provides spouses with career coaches free of charge with the Secco Career Center. Another place to look to find jobs that is right for you is the Military One Source Managing Your Career Essentials page, which among numerous other resources provides help with transferring professional licenses and certifications to another state or country. In closing, I would like to thank you all again for your participation here today. When our military spouses thrive, so does our military and our nation. Thank you very much.
Hello, my name is Ernest Rivera, and I hope you enjoyed that video that we just played from our leadership here at the Department of Defense. I am with the Defense Civilian Personnel Advisory Service, and this afternoon I'm going to cover the Department of Defense Priority Placement Program Military Spouse Preference Program. Hopefully by the time I finish covering this topic, you will have a better understanding of the differences between the Military Spouse Preference Program and the non-competitive hiring programs available for military spouses. If I could get the next slide, please. This is the final breakout session for this afternoon. We have several component representatives participating, so they will be able to answer any component specific questions that you may have. Additionally, we will have a 15 to 20 minute audio-based Q&A session immediately following this presentation. After that, we will have an open chat to allow you to type your questions, and they will be answered by several HR professionals from across the department. During the audio-based Q&A session, please raise your hand and we will acknowledge you and open your microphone to allow you to ask your question. The raise your hand function can be found under reactions in Zoom. Please limit your audio questions to 30 seconds each to allow as many participants as possible to ask questions. Additionally, please limit your audio questions to the information presented on the slides and use the chat function to ask any specific questions. Also, please address any questions that you may have involving a personal situation with your local human resources office. Lastly, we plan to send a transcript of the Q&As from today's sessions to the email addresses you all provided when you registered for this Expo. Next slide, please. This slide covers the mission for the Department of Defense. Our primary mission is to provide the military forces needed to deter war and ensure our nation's security. As such, the department engages in warfighting, humanitarian aid, peacekeeping, disaster relief, and homeland security, while simultaneously performing functions necessary to effectively and efficiently support our soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and their families. The Department of Defense employs approximately 1.4 million active duty members across all military components. 836,000 are selected reserve and 245,000 additional individual red reserve forces, and 735,000 appropriated fund and 126,000 non-appropriated funded civilian employees. Our military service members and civilians operate in every time zone and in every climate, with more than 450,000 of our civilian employees serving overseas. Next slide, please. In 1986, Public Law 99-145, codified in 10 United States Code 1784, directed the Secretary of Defense to establish a program that would provide employment preference to the spouses of active duty service members who relocate to accompany their military sponsors on a PCS move to a new duty location. With that, the DoD Military Spouse Preference Program was created as a sub-program of the DoD Priority Placement Program. Today, I will discuss military spouse preference eligibility criteria and the process used by military spouses to exercise their preference utilizing the application-based process in USA Jobs. I'll close by highlighting the differences between the military spouse non-competitive hiring authority and military spouse preference. The DoD Military Spouse Preference Program applies to spouses of active duty military members of the U.S. Armed Forces, including the U.S. Coast Guard and full-time National Guard, who desire priority consideration for appropriated fund positions in the accepted and competitive services. These are at the GS-15 grade level and below, or equivalent positions in other pay systems. The military spouse preference is meant to provide preference to qualified spouses of service members in hiring for positions that are being filled under competitive procedures. Spouses must be determined to be among the best qualified for the position. That means the spouse must be as qualified as the lowest ranked competitive candidate that could be sent to a hiring manager for potential selection. Can I get the next slide, please? In order to exercise your military spouse preference via USA Jobs, you must do the following. First, you have to create a USA Jobs account. Then, you may apply to any vacancy announcement, being sure to identify yourself as eligible underneath the Priority Placement Program DoD Military Spouse Preference. Then you have to complete the Military Spouse PPP self-certificate checklist. This checklist has to be submitted each and every time you apply for a vacancy announcement. Finally, you have to include all pertinent documents to ensure that you are eligible. At a minimum, this includes your resume, proof of marriage, PCS orders, and any other documents that might be identified in the vacancy announcement as needed to ensure that you have provided a complete application package. And those would all be provided through the job announcement in USA Jobs. Again, once the announcement closes, a human resource specialist will make a determination as to whether the military spouse meets the best qualified criteria we discussed earlier. If determined to be best qualified, the military spouse's name will be referred to the hiring official. If selected, the spouse must respond to the job offer within the required time frame. And those are going to be established by your local human resources offices. And so those may differ depending on the component and the HRO that you're dealing with at the time. If I could get the next slide, please. Now, please keep in mind that spousal preference does not apply if granting said preference would result in some of the following. If it would impact an employee who is already on DoD roles, and if granting such preference would result in a change to lower grade, separation of a current, permanent, temporary or term DoD employee. Additionally, preference is not applicable if granting it violates any statute for veterans preference or regarding nepotism. Finally, when spouses are within 6 months of PCSing with their sponsor to a new duty station, the spouse may be non-selected for permanent positions. And this is because you be within such a short time frame of departing said location that it does not behoove the hiring manager to bring somebody on board, train them up, and then of course they'll be leaving shortly. So ideally, the goal is to have you working there for at least an extended period of time while you are there with your sponsor. All right, if I could get the next slide, please. Now, these are some areas where your spouse preference eligibility will terminate at your sponsor's current duty location. It may terminate when the spouse accepts or declines a permanent federal position in the commuting area of the sponsor's current or new permanent duty location. This includes non-appropriated fund positions and military exchange positions, and this is a part of things whether or not preference was used to obtain the position. Additionally, if you lose your spousal status due to divorce, the death of the sponsor, retirement of the sponsor, or separation from active duty service. Lastly, if the spouse fails to meet the immediate appointability requirements of the job offered, then they would no longer be able to utilize that status in order to get said position. This means the spouse must complete all pre-employment criteria as well, such as timely completion of a physical, completion and timely submission of fingerprints, or submitting to a drug test during background investigations. If I could get the next slide, please. The primary purpose of this slide is to show the differences between military spouse preference and the military spouse hiring authority and how they are exclusive of one another, meaning one does not necessarily depend on the other. The main difference that you need to take away between the two is that military spouse hiring authority is applicable to all federal jobs, while military spouse preference is only applicable for DoD positions. As stated previously, the military spouse hiring authority is applicable to all federal positions, and until August of 2023, the criteria for having to relocate with the military sponsor does not apply to this hiring authority. However, in order to exercise military spouse preference for DoD positions, a PCS move is required. The military spouse hiring authority does include preference in hiring. However, the appointing authority can be used as an eligible appointing authority for military spouse preference eligible applicants. Much like if you were reinstatement eligible, meaning you previously held a competitive service job, you must be eligible under an appointing authority to exercise your preference. However, if a spouse is eligible for the military spouse hiring authority, military spouse preference is not required in order to be appointed. Finally, there are no limits to the use of military spouse hiring authority, but there is a limit to the use of the military spouse preference. Military spouse preference can only be used for one job offer per PCS move. So once you relocate with your military sponsor, you can only use the preference one time in that location. Once you PCS again, then it opens up again and you can use it there as well. If we get to the next slide, please. These are some of the comments and advice offered by military spouses from different components about their efforts to seek employment within the Department of Defense. I think one of the most important words of advice received from an Army spouse is to be flexible and don't get discouraged. I would like to add that it may take a while to get into the system, but please do not give up. A Navy spouse said, consider volunteer work to bolster your resume. If you do not have a lot of work experience, volunteering will help you develop new skills. An Air Force spouse also recommended networking. joining local clubs or spouse organizations when you arrive at a new duty location. And other spouses may have ideas that you have not thought of while you go through the application process. A Marine spouse is also provided that you can get help to adjusting to a new location. Having your own job, friends, and time away from the house will also get you more acclimated to the new area. And please ensure that you establish career goals, and this will help guide your search and navigate through the federal hiring process. Another word of advice that we provide to spouses is only apply to positions you are willing to accept. Spouse preference is lost for your current duty location if you accept or decline a federal job. You may want to seek non-federal employment until a federal job is available in your career field, or that you find one that you are qualified for when it is announced. Also, our office is contacted weekly regarding new spouse employment initiatives that Congress is looking to implement. Just know that military spouse employment is a high priority for this administration and for the Department of Defense. And we are always looking at multiple ways to help you find employment. Next slide, please. Oh, can we go back one slide? Thank you. This slide, I just want to provide you some websites that are great tools to help you find a job, learn how to search for jobs, or even provide some frequently asked questions regarding spousal employment. These links are provided through USA Jobs, the Department of Defense, and the Office of Personnel Management, and are useful resources when navigating the federal hiring process. So please take these away, utilize them, and try to leverage them while you engage in your job search. If I could get the next slide, please. So this concludes our presentation for the afternoon. We will now open the floor for questions that you may want to ask using the audio-based Q&A session. Please raise your hand in the Zoom call for us to recognize you as a speaker. The raise your hand function can be found under the reactions in Zoom. This Q&A session will last for approximately 15 to 20 minutes and will be immediately followed by an open chat Q&A session that will allow you to type your questions. Again, we ask that you please limit your audio questions to 30 seconds to allow as many participants as possible to ask questions. Additionally, please limit your audio questions to the information presented on these slides and use the chat function to ask any specific questions that you may have. Finally, please address any questions that you may have involving a personal situation with your local human resources office. And with that, we will go ahead and start opening the floor to questions, and we will see who has their hand raised. I'm not seeing any raised hands right now. Thomasina, do you happen to see anybody?
I do not, which is shocking. I don't see any raised hands at the moment.
Okay. Well, we'll stay on here, and if anybody wants to ask a question over the mic, just please let us know by raising your hand through Zoom. Okay, I do see a hand raised. Silvio, I believe, if you could please go ahead and provide your question.
Hi, thanks. So hopefully, so the majority of the audience I imagine here are DoD spouses of some sort, whether military or government civilian, because that's how at least I received the solicitation. So what flexibility do you have to keeping spouses together, right? Because typical application process is 1 year, and then assignments are 3 years. So that means really someone could be in position for 2 years before we would have to move again. What type of positions? Because I notice this trend when I go to USA Jobs. I'm not saying that some of the spouses only positions or spouses reserve positions are not high skilled, but I do not see many. Oh, hi, Lucy. I don't see many that are for upper tier like management or require higher skills. They're typically like data entry or something that's a little, I mean, obviously a little more fluid, but more career like driven positions are not really available. So that really comes into 2 questions: is what availability is there to joint spouse assignment and the flexibility of those programs? And then the second is, why do we not see more upper level or career like advancing positions reserved for spouses or the spouse program?
Okay, let me go ahead and try to address that for you. Beginning with trying to keep the spouses together. So when we're talking military spouse preference, right, it is intended to keep the spouse and the sponsor together because you can only utilize that preference when you relocate with your military sponsor. Now, in terms of utilizing that preference for a specific level of position, it's applicable to all positions within the Department of Defense at the GS 15 level and below. So even those higher graded positions that you mentioned, there is no reserve process, if you will, saying, all right, we're only going to hire military spouses for these positions. They would be considered for any position from GS 15 and below. So that is something that's there. But of course, you do have to go through the application process, and you are competing with folks who are already in the federal government, folks who have maybe retired from the military recently, other military spouses. So it's not to say that the competition for those positions will not be high, but they're not reserved for a particular type of applicant, if that answers your question. Okay. Brittany, I see your hand up. If you would like to go ahead and present your question. Hello, Brittany. I can't hear you if you're talking.
There we go. I couldn't unmute myself.
Oh, okay.
So, question. I was on earlier asking questions. So you're saying under the not the MSP, but the other hiring authority, it doesn't matter what rank you are?
Well, under either authority. Now, when I was speaking just now, I was speaking specifically about the military spouse preference, because the other part to that question was keeping them together. Okay. And of course, you can only utilize the preference when you relocate with the military sponsor. Okay. But in either scenario, you would be considered for any position at the GS 15 level or below.
Okay, here's my question. So I have applied for I applied for a job that I was a GS5. I'm on leave without pay. I applied to a 7, but it actually had, you needed to be a 6 before you could get the 7. So most 7s I can get with a 5, but I couldn't get this one because I wasn't technically a 6. And it got kicked back to me saying I wasn't even considered, even though I used military spouse preference.
Now, when you say 6 level experience, keep in mind, it doesn't mean that you had to be a GS6, but you had to have the experience level. Yes. So that could have been attained through the private sector or, of course, through the public sector. So in either scenario, it's about the experience level and how that is reflected within the resume.
Let's say I had a GS5 position, but I was working above a GS5 because we did not have an NCO. Would that be considered working at like a 6 or more? even though
Depending, you would have to kind of look at the experience in order to make that kind of determination. But on the surface, yes, if you're operating at a level above a GS5, then ideally, yes, you would have that GS6 level experience.
It got kicked back with what you did not put out an SS50 saying this, therefore you weren't even considered.
Showing that you had that time and grade, is that what you're saying?
So they're saying that since I didn't have specifically a GS6 on paper, then I wasn't even considered.
Do you know which component that was with?
I'm talking with the Air Force guy. It's Air Force.
Okay.
So
what I could
talk with him.
What I could suggest is that maybe you ask that question in the chat. We do have some folks from the components answering questions in the chat, and they could probably address component specific criteria that could be addressed for your question, if that could assist you.
Cool. That one just came up because you said any grade level, and I was like, wait, I got rejected without even like being looked at, it sounded like. So okay.
No, I totally understand. And so yes, we do have somebody who could help assist with that question.
Okay, and I think he's going to email me, so thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Hello, I believe I have Carl. Carl, I see you have your hand up. Okay, there we go.
Can you hear me? Well, I don't know if this is being repetitive, but I'm also a DoD employee and we are getting ready to PCS, but I'm staying behind because I want to keep my current job. So my current employer, they're trying to work a way for me to telework, but it is not guaranteed. It's already been approved at the first 2 stages. So I need 2 more stages up to get approved for that telework. And DoD is not often fond of giving employees, telework, especially in certain bases. So my plan is, course of action 1 is, if I get approved, it's just a lift and shift. But if I don't get approved, my plan is to stay behind and continue to apply. Does MSP apply for me, or do I just have to use the other authority of employment? Because I don't want to have a gap in service. I want to be able to keep working here, and then when I get a job on that other location, then I will put in my 2 weeks notice to move on to the next DoD job.
Sure. And I can say that, typically you are correct in that DoD has been a hard turn for us to start utilizing telework and remote work more frequently. However, I can say that we are making that turn, and a lot more organizations are open to allowing telework or remote work. You see a lot more announcements even offering virtual positions, which can be filled anywhere. So hopefully that comes through for you. But to answer your question regarding military spouse preference, it can only be utilized if you were to relocate with your sponsor. So in your case, you would have to rely on the military spouse hiring authority. And again, that can be utilized outside of DoD. That can be utilized for any federal job within your commuting area.
Okay, so then what if they say, go ahead, move in with your spouse, we'll give you the telework opportunity until you find a job there. So I'm physically in that location now. Can I use that MSP while I carry a DoD position?
As long as you haven't used it previously in that location, yes. Because you get one bite at the apple at a new location.
And while I still carry an existing DoD position on temporary telework.
Yeah, that wouldn't be an issue.
Okay, well, thank you.
You're welcome. Lucy, I believe we have your hand up.
Yes, thank you so much. So quick question, and I apologize if this came up earlier. I was just now able to join in, but so I'm actually a military spouse stationed overseas, interested in what opportunities are available in terms of remote work for military spouses overseas? Because I certainly do see positions that are remote within the US, but you know, we have the legal ability to work overseas as US citizen, you know, it's using I'm blanking on the Military Spouse Relief Act. So I'm just wondering if that applies to any of the DoD positions. Thanks.
Just to confirm, are you asking if those positions overseas are eligible for remote work? Lucy?
It would not let me unmute myself. I'm sorry.
No worries.
I'm asking if I did want to apply to a US based position that allows for remote work. For example, right now I work for a US private sector company and I'm coded as a US employee, even though I'm physically located overseas. So I'm wondering if DoD has plans or if they currently allow that for US based remote positions for military spouses who are stationed overseas due to the Military Spouse Relief Act.
Okay. I think I understand your question a little bit better now. Unfortunately, I don't have that answer at the ready. If you wouldn't mind putting that in the chat, we can go ahead and research that and get you an answer back.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Hello, Ernest.
Yes, hello.
This is Bobby. The individual, the lady that was speaking before Lucy, I want to say to her regarding that question about once you move from one location to the other and you retaining that job via telework in the new duty location, you will not be able to do that if it's a permanent position that you're on back at the other location and you're doing remote work. Now, we do allow exceptions for, let's say, 30 days or so, but not keeping that job and applying your military spouse preference at the new location while you're still permanently employed, albeit telework, at the previous location. You will not be able to do that.
Thank you for clarifying, Bobby. I heard temporary in her question, but thank you for clarifying that.
Well, the reason, yeah, and I know she said, why not? Because just when you interpret the language, it says that if you have a federal, position and you're already a permanent employee, and you move to another location, oftentimes people either go on leave without pay, or sometimes they have to resign, unfortunately. But if you're in a new location and you're working remote, and it's a permanent position, you got full-time employment, albeit remote. You've got full-time employment.
Thank you.
So we do not allow that. But if you did it and you did an agreement with your previous supervisor to serve on that remote position temporarily, you sign a temporary remote work agreement, if you will, and you provide that to the HR office, then they will allow you to, when you're applying for the job, to exercise it. But that's something you have to talk with the gaining HR office when you are exercising your spouse preference, and let them know that you are under a temporary remote agreement.
Hey, Bobby, I see that she has her hand up again. There may be a follow-up here.
Let her come in. Yes.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Carl, please go ahead.
Thank you so much for clarifying that. Yes, I do have a temporary work agreement at this time, so I can use that if I'm gonna take that MSP then, if I'm on that other location. Because I have gone as far as being left behind as a spouse for 14 months in our prior duty location before we moved down here. before I found another job. So I'm worried that I might have to stay behind for another 14 months or 2 years before I can follow my spouse and our children.
Well, with the recent uptick in remote work all over the world, let alone just the U.S., if you go to a manager and that manager is agreeable that you can do your job remotely permanently, a lot of people are doing that, and we encourage, of course, in DoD, we encourage managers to exercise that authority to do that. They may have to go a few levels up to get it approved, but we encourage that. That's one way that the military spouse would not have a break in service. You can continue to work, and you're doing remote work, working from
And
home.
yes,
But if
and yes, they
if
did.
you're looking for another job on a military spouse preference, then there might be some level of sacrifice that you have to take on that.
Absolutely. Thank you. Yes, my employer has gone as far as doing a lot of paperwork for me right now, justifying the value of the contracts that I'm handling to be able to go that far. So they were able to pass the 2 stages and going up to the command further up. So thank you.
That's great. 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 We love to hear that. All right. Back to you, Ernest.
Thank you, Bobby.
You're welcome. And oh, by the way, we're going to run this audio up to maybe 350, 355 for anyone that wants to ask questions on the audio. Over.
Well, as Bobby had just announced, we're going to keep this line open for anybody who wants to ask any questions over the Zoom call here. So please feel free to raise your hand if you would like to ask a question.
And while we're waiting, just remember when we talk about having to be best qualified, it's really among the best qualified. For example, if you apply for a job and they are scoring, rating and ranking that competitive vacancy, and they have a cutoff score of 80, and they're only going to determine people best qualified if you score 80 or above, and you are a military spouse and applies for that competitive position through competitive procedures. If you score 80, you are considered just as qualified because of you, if you're using your military spouse preference, as the person that scores 100. So if they are not a military spouse, under those competitive procedures, merit promotion procedures, you will block that person that scored 100 if that person is not a military spouse. If there are other military spouses on that referral certificate that apply for that job that scored higher than you, then the manager can interview them and you too as a military spouse and still select you because you were rated among the best qualified, and that's what we ask. Not necessarily the best qualified scoring 100. If you scored 80, if they are receiving and issuing a certificate with people that scored 80 or above. Over.
Thank you, Bobby. I do see that we have a hand up. KH, if you want to go ahead and relay your question.
Yes, good afternoon. I was just wondering if there would be any point in time during this session where we receive, specific point of contact information, or be able to speak with any hiring managers, or something along the lines of really getting in contact with a person. Because from my experience with applying on USA Jobs, it feels like, it's very, it's not very personal. I'm a veteran and a military spouse with a disability rating, and I've been applying for about 2 years for positions that I know I am, some of them, overqualified for, and I haven't even gotten, considered for the position. So I was just wondering if there would be any personal interaction that we would, be able to get during this opportunity.
Well, thank you for your question. Unfortunately, in this forum, we're not able to provide any kind of personal POC interaction for particular hiring or hiring announcements that you see out there. Really, in order to do that, you would have to engage at the local human resource office level. So whomever you're applying with, if you reach out to that human resources office, they may be able to further assist you and provide you a little bit more personal interaction with regards to the hiring process or whatever questions you may have about a particular job announcement. I hope that answers your question. All right, well, we're at about 3:45 time-wise, so we have about 5 to 10 more minutes that we'll go ahead and keep this open. So anybody who would like to address any questions over the Zoom call here, please feel free to raise your hand and we'll go ahead and address it. Also a reminder that the chat option is still open and available. If you would prefer to ask your question through that channel, you can still post questions in the chat, and we have folks who are willing and able to answer those questions as they present themselves. Okay, it looks like we're at the 3:50 mark. Mr. Nguyen, did you have any closing remarks before we go ahead and start releasing folks?
Yes, I do. What we'll do, Ernest, is give them about 2 more minutes to see if there are any more questions in the chat or audio, and I'll do my closing remarks. Thank you.
Sounds good, sir. Hello, Sylvia. I see you have your hand raised.
Yeah, I'm following up on a post that Mel replied, and I think I'm gathering some of the frustrations and the concerns that some of us spouses are bringing up is regarding telework. That seems like the common recurring theme. And I'm just going on the website and looking at the positions. At first, I looked at the senior positions because those are the ones I was specifically looking at, and I kind of opened up the window to all GS positions. And I mean, there's 22 positions that are telework to spouses that have that preference out of all of USA jobs. I didn't even filter by DOD alone. I think there's some Department of Justice that might have been miscategorized in here. So I'll just say warmly 20 positions out of all of USA jobs, maybe 21, because yeah, one DOJ, one Department of Agriculture position. Maybe I'm not filtering right. So just 20 positions. There is almost more than that, of more than those people in this room alone. So what assurances or what availability, like how can you address that at all, Ernest? Or, like maybe I'm not searching this website, maybe I'm not searching USA jobs correctly, or because I think many of us are under the impression that that's kind of the way things are going. Some people
I would
complain.
agree with you.
Yeah.
Yes, from an HR perspective, and going out here and trying to compete for talent, if you will, absolutely. More and more workplaces are looking at virtual, remote work, things of that nature, and allowing more expansive telework. Now, as I think I stated in an earlier question, the Department of Defense specifically has been a bit slow to turn on some of that. And then for some federal agencies outside of the Department of Defense, some of them have been easier and some have been more resistant. I can say that the Office of Personnel Management, has released information and guidance to federal agencies, allowing more flexibility and kind of pushing us in that direction. But as with some things within the government, it is a slow process to change and to make that turn that we need to get to. But I agree 1,000% that we do need to get to that place where we are offering more virtual and remote work across all federal agencies. Unfortunately, I would agree we are not quite there yet, if that answers your question, Sylvia.
Yeah, mostly. Because I think someone called in earlier. They were trying to figure out what's the purpose of us being here. Like, are we going to get the opportunity to talk to perhaps some of these offices, some of the
Right.
HR about these positions, and will it happen after this break or into the breakout sessions? So I think that's probably the first thing that people might be curious about is, okay, so we're getting this overview. We're getting some ideas about the spouse employment preferences. Some of us, are actually going to USA Jobs and trying to search for stuff ourselves, but some of us really would just like to get that direct feedback. They might be waiting months, if not years, simply to be denied a position that they applied for. And by that time, they've already PCS'd. You know what I mean?
No, I do, and I understand your frustration there. Now, this particular event that we're hosting is really meant to be more informative in nature. So we wouldn't have the particulars of individual announcements or hiring practices at the different component level or within individual human resource offices. This is really meant to be more, like I said, informative and in general in nature in terms of the information being provided. In terms of doing what you're asking, I think engaging at the local human resource office level is where you would have to start in order to get really more information on a particular job announcement that maybe you applied for. Now, granted, I understand sometimes it can take a while for you to get a response. I will say that on the call right now, we do have members from various components. So let's say there's a particular position that you had applied to for the Department of Navy. You could pose that question in the chat. And then we do have some folks who could help look into that for you. But unfortunately, we don't have anybody who can engage at that personal level here on the call right now. It's something that we would have to research and get back to you if that helps answer the other part.
And Ernest, so sir, if you look in the chat, we've got a link in there for the job fair that's coming up on October the 27th. These job fairs you can go to, and yes, you will be able to speak directly to these HR folks and managers regarding their vacancies. It's out on our DoD Civilian Careers website, and the link is in the chat. Over.
Thank you, Bobby.
All right, so that's thank you, Ernest, and thank you to the presenters. That wraps up our last session for today. I would like to thank all of you very much for joining us today. We hope that you have enjoyed moving around through the various federal government chat rooms with a goal of finding employment. We have posted links to our jobs within the Department of Defense that are available for your consideration. Now, over the past several hours, we've fielded your questions via audio and the chat room regarding exercising your military spouse preference for our DoD vacancies. As such, I recommend, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, that you visit our various DoD websites that were provided in the presentation, and also go out to opm.gov and USA Jobs to obtain more information about your military spouse preference eligibility. Again, it has been a tremendous pleasure to assist you today as you're seeking employment within the federal government. I hope this information provides a clearer understanding of how to exercise your military spouse preference. Just remember, when we started out this morning, OPM talked to you about those various hiring authorities for military spouses. We talked to you, and we're discussing military spouse preference that are reserved for DoD positions. So on behalf of the Secretary of Defense and the video that you saw, the Undersecretary of Defense for Personnel and Readiness, Mr. Cisneros, we would like to thank you very much for your outstanding service to this great nation. Thank you, and all the best in finding a job in the federal service. Take care. Bye-bye.